Hi friends, welcome back to the Accent Designer. My name is Osama Gazal, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing with you guys my experience interviewing for Facebook, or I should say Meta. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so I'm going to start from the very beginning when I first received this email from Facebook back in 2020. It was around August 2020, if I remember correctly, and at this time I had just got laid off from my previous job that I had before. It was a very rough time, and I was very excited to actually receive this email. So when I first received that email, I was trying to pretty much conduct my due diligence and make sure the person who actually sent it really works for Facebook and not just like one of those scam emails. So after conducting the due diligence and everything, I replied and said, of course, I'm excited and ready to explore the opportunity. A couple days moving forward, we had set up a screener call. She called me and we had a very nice conversation. She was asking me questions, very general questions, no product design in-depth questions. So she was basically just asking me about my previous experience, how long I've been doing product design for, and what made me interested in Facebook, or what got me excited to explore the opportunity and start the conversation. Then the second part of the call was basically her trying to investigate my areas of expertise and interest. She explained the fact that they're hiring for specific positions for Messenger, Instagram, and as far as I remember, Marketplace, Facebook Marketplace. And these are the areas she's in charge of or hiring for. And I said, yeah, I mean, I would be mostly gravitated towards Marketplace because I always like this kind of peer-to-peer kind of experience. And the second best preference for me would be Messenger. A couple weeks after this, again, I started the final and official interview process. All right, so at this point, before getting into the actual interview process, I just want to make it clear that prior to Facebook, I only had one interview experience with one of the large companies, and it was Amazon. That was way back, a couple years back, and to be completely honest, I was not like so qualified. I was underqualified, to be completely honest, to get the job. However, I'm using this example just to compare the process and how they conduct the whole interviewing procedure and how they communicate with the candidates. So Amazon was very like straightforward application process, and they don't seem to or they seem very busy. I don't want to put it in a wrong way, but Amazon seems to be, and of course they have a large pool of candidates and they're trying to pick like the best candidates and the strongest candidates for the available positions. But when I compare how they conduct it to Facebook, it's just a night and day. Facebook, it's more so that they're trying to help the candidates succeed, and they do provide tons of materials throughout the entire process from start to finish, PDFs, tips and tricks how to conduct each interview and what each interview means. They even try to schedule like casual conversations and casual interviews with one of the most recent candidates they hired in order to have this conversation, walk them through your portfolio and just ask them questions about what kind of expectations await you and how you can handle these expectations. So they actually do a lot. Amazon, they did not do that. At least that was my experience, because at Amazon I went through 3 steps interview process, and the only thing they did was pretty much providing a PDF to communicate the methods they use to evaluate the candidates, something called STAR. You can actually YouTube it or like find it on YouTube or Google. Facebook, on the other hand, they do a lot. Like the recruiters and the people who walk you through the process from start to finish actually do a lot. All right, so now moving on to the first round of interviews. And this round consists of 2 interviews. The first one is a typical portfolio walkthrough, where you have to pick 2 most recent projects and walk the interviewers through them. And the second one is what they call app critique. At this point, I had no experience conducting this app critique interview whatsoever, so it was completely new to me. So I was a little bit nervous. The portfolio walkthrough, I was a bit more confident because at this point I had some good projects up on my sleeve and I was ready to walk them through it. They sent me the material, the PDF material, the advice and tips, and I had a lot of conversations with the recruiters at this point. And there are just a few things that I'm trying to emphasize here, guys. At Facebook, and I guess that would be pretty much the same requirement for any large company, they don't want to see extensive, wordy case studies in the interview process because you're only given 45 minutes. You have to present 2 projects and you have to be very well prepared because people will interrupt you like in a walkthrough. It's not like you're talking and they will save their questions to the very end of the interview. No, they're actually interrupting, engaging in a conversation, so on and so forth. So number 1, it has to be a presentation style, just a number of slides. Number 2, try to have as high fidelity designs as possible from your designs. No wireframes, no low fidelity napkin, whatever that is. On the slides, only high fidelity. I actually, in my case, I went the extra mile and added like animated prototype. And I actually took screen captures from the actual apps I have in the App Store. So it was very helpful for me in that sense. And the second interview, the app critique, is basically you and an interviewer on the spot deciding on whatever app you want to walk through, and it has to be mobile application, not a website. So you choose an app and you have to criticize it, just walk them through the app, what you like, what you dislike, and what kind of improvements you see in this product. And there are just a few things that I'm also trying to emphasize in this kind of interviews. In this one, they're trying to evaluate 3 things. Number 1, how can you evaluate the product thinking behind this app or behind this product? Number 2, how can you evaluate the visual language and user interface? And number 3, how can you suggest potential areas of improvements? It is not just about, oh, I like this app because of X, Y, and Z, or I don't like it because of 1, 2, and 3. You actually have, like, your evaluation has to be very balanced and very, very real from a user perspective. So I conducted these 2 interviews. They happen in the same day, by the way. So it's back-to-back interview. You're not given any time to like rest, except for like maybe 5 minutes just if you want to drink a cup of water or something. But that's pretty much about it. I conducted these 2 interviews and I thought at the time I did okay. I wasn't really keeping any high hopes at this point. I learned from previous experiences. A couple days later, I received a call from the recruiter and the feedback blew my mind. Like previously, I've received a couple good feedback and that's how apparently I managed to land jobs before. But this time when the recruiter called me, she said that both the interviewers, both of them, they said I crushed the interview, and that blew my mind. Honestly, I never had this experience where people are very expressive and they're not super private about telling the candidate if they did well or not. They're not preserved, they're not acting cool, basically. No, that was the only feedback I got on the call. Like both of them thought that you crushed it. Maybe in the portfolio walkthrough, the interviewer really liked the fact that you had a lot of animated prototypes, but sometimes she thought the slides were a little bit wordy because you included a lot of bullet points. So, and that was the only feedback I got from the first round. So I, of course, kept that in mind. I tried to fine tune my presentations and reformat them for the second round. Right, so that was pretty much the call I got. Then a couple weeks later, I received another email asking me to select pretty much the same thing, a number of time slots, and this time it's just going to be the second and supposedly the last round of interviews. And this time, this round consists of 4 interviews. And the first one is a 30-minute portfolio walkthrough, no questions asked, no introductions or whatsoever. It's basically you open up the cam, people join the call, and you present the 2 projects you had, and that's it for 30 minutes. Number 2, the second interview is going to be the app critique again. So you have another session of app critique, brand new person, and it has to be a brand new app that you haven't critiqued before. The third interview in this round was the background check. It's basically two interviewers from the panel who joined your portfolio walkthrough will join you again and start diving deeper into the projects, asking you questions, and basically trying to understand the rationale, your product thinking capabilities, the visual decisions, the user interface decisions, so on and so forth. Basically, conducting the due diligence that haven't been conducted in the presentation. Then interview number 4 in this round, which is the whiteboarding session, and it's just basically you have like 2 or 3 interviewers. In my case, it was 2, and you share your screen. You're given a problem space, and you have to come up with a solution. And it's a completely open concept, so you come up with whatever solution you think fit for the problem space. You're even given the freedom to identify the problem space the way you see fit. There is no specific or particular definition of the problem space. The first one, the presentation. I fine-tuned the presentation and the projects I had from the first time. I tried to make the slides even more concise. I tried to focus more on articulating the prototypes and the design decisions behind each feature, and I tried to provide as much context as possible to my relationships with my teams that I used to work with, and how I came up with these solutions. And of course, I can't even emphasize this enough, strongly highlight the impact of your final project. In my case, I used the ratings and the number of downloads from the App Store, as well as the revenue the app and the new features and the new initiatives have achieved. And that pretty much did the job for me. The second interview, which was the app critique, very similar to the first one. You and the interviewer choose one of the apps. The second time I actually chose Spotify, which is very popular, and this time was slightly different. The interviewer style was kind of different than the first one. The first one was basically having me sharing the screen, connect on my phone, sharing my phone screen, and just walk them through whatever app I chose. They were very open to whichever app, and in the first time I chose Yahoo Finance because I've been using Yahoo Finance for 3 years. Then the second time I chose Spotify. The second time was different in the sense that the interviewer was mostly asking you very definitive questions, and you have to ask. So they were asking me questions like, what do you think the revenue model for Spotify? What would happen here? What would happen there? If I go through this flow, what do you see work and what do you see doesn't work? So it was very definitive number of questions, and you have to answer, and you have to articulate your answer very, very well. And in each answer, that's their expectations. You need to emphasize both the product thinking and the visual language, as well as the user interface pros and cons. Then the third one, the background check. Basically, what you did in the presentation will be reviewed in this third interview. So I had 2 interviewers. They went diving deep into each specific feature that I explained in a presentation. They were asking me questions like, how did you land on this feature? What kind of research you conducted to come up with this feature? Were you working alone or with other groups of stakeholders? How did you hand off the project to the developers? How did this feature work in comparison to what you had before? So it was very intense and very goal-oriented and impact-oriented set of questions, trying to dive deep and try to understand where is the candidate coming from, and if they really know what they built or they just put together a bunch of pixels and shipped it. Then interview number 4, which was the whiteboard session. It was honestly, I had a lot of fun working on this exercise. I had 2 lovely interviewers. They were very respectful. All the interviewers were respectful, but the project or the exercise they chose was super fun to me because I was lucky they chose the ATM machines. Prior to me becoming a product designer, I was a banker and I was a retail banker. So I was very hyped because I know a lot about ATM machines, and I know a lot about what can improve, what can be improved, and what basically the pros and cons of interacting with ADM machine from a technical standpoint. So I had a lot of fun working on this exercise, and it's a 45-minute exercise, and you need to be very mindful of time boxing everything. So you need to actually speak out loud your thought process. It's not like you're just taking prompts or receiving prompts and questions from the interviewers and trying to put together some screens and wireframes. You're trying to engage, you're trying to ask questions. So I was asking tons of questions. I was trying to focus and like trickle down on identifying the thought process with the interviewers, and I did, and I was like on the spot, I can see it because that was the feedback I'm getting from the two interviewers. They thought the way I defined the problem space was good, and they liked the solution, especially the one who was managing or introduced the topic to me. He was a big fan of the solution. So I thought this interview went very well. So overall, that was pretty much the day. It was a 5.5 hours rounds of 4 interviews. So that was pretty much the process I had. Then I received another email like right after the interview, the second round ended. I received an email from the recruiter saying that the team will gather. They're probably gonna debrief and come up with a decision. And a couple days after, I received another email from the recruiter saying that for some reason that I don't know why, and I tried to dive deeper with the recruiter, but for privacy reasons, they can't really name the exact reasons why they landed on this decision. She mentioned that there was a little bit of a split. You had a lot of positive signals and definitely outweighed any negative or any concerns, any negative feedback or any concerns. But even that you had more positive signals than negative, in such cases, we need to conduct another interview, and this time it's going to be with one of the design directors. So this interview will pretty much lead to the finalized yes or no when it comes to a job offer. I tried to understand why, like where these mixed opinions coming from, but I didn't really have an answer. The only thing she said was that you did a pretty good job identifying the thought process, the product thinking, like the stories behind each decision and how you landed there. But some interviewers on a panel were a little bit concerned about the visual designs, and they were trying to understand more of how you can interact with design systems and how you can use existing design systems to build meaningful products and reiterate quite rapidly. So, okay, I was like, okay, even though the second project that I chose was heavily visually oriented, it was basically about an app that I built on the App Store. This one, by the way, called Logoscopic. It's like a logo and icon suite that you can find in the App Store. And my entire job in this app was basically just building shapes and colors, so and color patterns. So I didn't really understand where is that concern coming from, but I tried to be considerate of it and try to account for it next time. So we scheduled another and final round of interview. I met with the design director, and he was very respectful person. He was very polite and pretty much similar to what we had before, but this time I tried to make my presentation even more concise because the whole point of this interview was him and myself getting into a conversation and ask questions. He asked me a lot of questions about the projects, what kind of impact I achieved, and this time he was more outcome and number oriented. So that's what I did. I tried to highlight what kind of impact I've done, the number of reviews and ratings and even some revenue that we've achieved, publishing those apps before. I thought it went very well. Then the moment of truth. A couple days after, she actually called me, and she said the team had a wonderful time engaging in a conversation. They thought you showcased and demonstrated very strong capabilities when it comes to product design, product thinking, and executing on that thinking. But for some reason, the overall consensus was not to move on at this time, and that really confused me. So if the team think that you did a pretty good job explain and like basically heading on every item they have on the checklist when it comes to hiring candidates, why the general consensus is against it. So she explained to me, thankfully, she explained to me that the position we're hiring for is more on a senior level. If you're aware of the hiring system at Facebook, everyone's called product designer until you become a director or executive. But as a product designer, there are levels for this. So there is something called IC3, IC4, IC5, etc., etc. And the one I was being interviewed for was IC5, which is considered more on a senior level, and that's the reason why they consider hiring starting from IC5 to IC8. They consider that like a higher risk, and that's the reason why they tend to be much pickier when hiring candidates. The answer was not very clear, if I'm being completely honest. That's mainly the only concern I had conducting the process with Facebook. Everything was positive, everything was great. The fact that I couldn't get like solid feedback why the general consensus was a no, I don't really understand. But maybe the way I handled the transition between the product thinking and the execution wasn't what they expected, or wasn't articulated in a way that would definitely blow their mind. I don't really know, because on all the projects I worked on, I was pretty much equally engaged in both sides. I was working on the product thinking from very early stage, 0 to 1 products, as well as execution. So working on like assets, UI patterns and libraries, etc., etc. So maybe there is something to do with articulation. Some questions that I got, when I think about it again, some questions that I got from the design director that met me in the end, he was asking me questions about things like, have you been engaged in like budgeting, working with executive level to budget projects from start to finish? I work with a lot of startups and small teams, so I was very engaged in the process from start to finish. But maybe they were looking for someone who was engaged in projects on a larger scale, budgeting and taking care of projects on a larger scale, as well as seeing how they can bring this large scale budgeting and thinking into execution and build and design elements for it. And there is nothing against you, because again, that I'm quoting here, I want to emphasize that the team had a wonderful time, and the fact that you or us conducted the entire process, 8 interviews, demonstrates the fact that we really thought you're a good candidate for this position. But maybe you need a little bit of time to demonstrate more strength and more expertise in the areas that we thought you lacked a little bit. And that's pretty much about it, guys. My experience interviewing for Facebook, it was a very lengthy process that lasted for 3 months. I conducted the whole thing, 8 interviews. So I'm not gonna say I'm proud or anything like that, because I haven't gotten a job at the time. But you never know what's good and what's bad for you. Like now, a couple months after, I'm having a very good job at the Globe and Mail here in Canada. I'm very happy. I'm working with wonderful people. But again, I'm trying not to overthink it. I'm trying to push forward. Just keep in mind, when you actually reach to that level in the interview process with Facebook and you get rejected or you get a no, you can't really reapply for any position until a year after. You have to wait an entire year, then you can pick up where you started and reapply for new positions. Yeah, all right, that's pretty much about it for today, guys. I just wanted to share this experience with you. Hopefully you found it entertaining and valuable if you've ever considered applying for jobs at Facebook or Meta. Thank you very much for tuning in, and see you next time.